Look, before I can even get into everything wrong with the Nintendo Wii, I can't honestly look you in the eye and tell you that the console that outsold both the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 as being a bad console. Hell, the Nintendo Wii was the 7th best selling console of all time, so Nintendo must have been doing something right. But I honestly believe that a lot of the aspects that made the Wii such a hit success in the 7th generation of consoles made the Wii U a complete failure during the 8th generation of consoles. So before we can get into what went wrong, we got to get into what went right. And right off the bat, the Wii was the cheapest and weakest console on the market, and that's actually a good thing because the most successful consoles, at least in terms of sales, were all super affordable and underpowered for their generation. The top 3 best-selling consoles were the PlayStation 2, followed by the Nintendo DS, and finally the Switch. And that makes a lot of sense because at the end of the day, video games are a luxury hobby and most people don't want to spend that much money on them. But if you really wanted to use the most powerful gaming machine available, then you would spend over $1,000 and you would get a dedicated gaming PC. The whole value proposition of even using a console is that it's significantly more affordable than a gaming PC and it works right out of the box with few headaches, and the Wii fits that description to a T. Nintendo also revolutionized gaming by bringing back retro gaming in full swing. The Wii Shop channel had one of the largest selections of classic video games available. And prior to this, the only way to play a retro game from, let's say, the Super Nintendo to the Genesis was to illegally pirate the game and play it through an emulator or track down a physical copy that was way too overpriced. And so it's pretty awesome that Nintendo gave us another legal venue to play these old school games. Nintendo also didn't play things safe this generation. While other consoles like the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 were just updated versions of previous consoles, the Nintendo Wii played radically different than the GameCube. Rather than using a traditional gamepad, the Wii focused on IR gaming and motion controls with a controller that looked like nothing seen before. And this novelty factor made the Nintendo Wii a hit success among the casual audience, which was a huge untapped market that both Microsoft and Sony were completely neglecting at the time. But at the end of the day, I find that the Wii was really a big monkey's paw for Nintendo. It revived the company after the mediocre sales of the GameCube, but at the same time, all of the things that made the Wii such a hit success didn't translate into the next generation of consoles. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Wii U was a complete failure. I believe that a lot of the problems that made the Wii U such a big failure was just an extension of everything that went wrong with the original Wii. But before I get to how or why, please like, comment, and subscribe to the Gaming Grappler. The more this channel grows, the more time, effort, and dedication I can bring into delivering you guys content on a consistent and regular basis. And with that being said, enjoy the show. One of the biggest long-term problems for the Wii was that Nintendo prioritized the casual market at the complete expense of the hardcore market. And to be fair, both Sony and Microsoft were guilty of the reverse, where they completely neglected the casuals. And I don't really get this mindset in the slightest. Like, a console is just a media playing device like a DVD player. You wouldn't expect a DVD playing manufacturer to only market their device to a specific demographic of people. You want everybody and anybody to be using your product. And one of the reasons why the Wii was so successful was that Nintendo finally tapped into that vast casual market of people that don't normally play video games. And Nintendo did this by heavily marketing the novelty of motion controls to people that wouldn't even consider themselves as being gamers. And the novelty worked. To people that don't normally play video games, the Wii looked like the future. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck felt like an early version of virtual reality. It was the 2006 version of the craze behind VR. And the commercials leaned into this by focusing on alternative demographics. You would see grandmas heavily featured, mom and dad, and your little sister. And the Wii had this real family-friendly type of vibe. And this was in complete contrast to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, who exclusively targeted young males in their teenage years and early 20s. And I gotta say, this was kind of a polarizing generation. You were either playing grim, dark, and edgy military shooters on the 360 or PS3, or you were playing Kirby's Epic Yarn or Cooking Mama on the Wii. Yes, there were some exceptions on the Wii, like Mad World and No More Heroes, which had this edgy vibe to them, but it was the exception, not the rule. Let's face it, the Wii was marketed and sold as this fun party toy to bring out when you had company over. And Nintendo leaned into this by shipping the Wii with Wii Sports, a popular party game meant to show off the console's motion controls. And if that wasn't enough, Nintendo would periodically release new peripherals with the sole purpose of reaching that gold mine of casual gamers, like the Wii Fit board that was a huge success among stay-at-home moms. This novelty factor, paired up with the console's low price tag, made the Wii sell out everywhere. In 2007, this console was like impossible to track down, but I kind of feel like this novelty was a big monkey's paw for Nintendo. A casual gamer, by definition, is someone that isn't interested in putting a large time investment into playing video games. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a casual baseball fan. I'll watch it when it's on, but don't expect me to understand half the plays or who the best player is. You see, these are people that follow trends and don't really have any loyalty to any brand. Part of the Wii's success was that it didn't have any competition in the casual marketplace. The Wii came out in 2006. The iPhone wouldn't release for another year, and mobile gaming would still take another few years to take off the ground. The Wii had some time to milk the casual market with very little competition, but this casual marketplace wouldn't stick around for the release of the Wii U. The Wii U's biggest failure was Nintendo no longer had a stranglehold on all of those casuals. The Wii U released in 2012 when mobile gaming was well established and most casuals just made the switch to their smartphones, and Nintendo just couldn't compete anymore. After all, a smartphone could do everything and anything in addition to gaming. And unlike a dedicated gaming console, cell phones are, for better or for worse, mandatory and needed in day-to-day life. The Wii U's name was also confusing to a lot of casuals. Most people thought that it was another peripheral for the Wii, like grandma just thought that this was something that they can add on like the Wii Fit board. And the hardcore market just moved on to PC gaming or other consoles, and that just left Nintendo with their diehard fans, which isn't enough to sustain a console on its own. And it didn't have to be like this. Nintendo could have had a diverse audience of both hardcore and casual players alike. There's no reason that they only had to focus on one particular demographic. Hear me out here, but I really do believe that Nintendo could have targeted that hardcore demographic of first-person shooter players that was popular at the time, because IR aiming was significantly underutilized in comparison to motion controls, and IR aiming is one of the best innovations Nintendo brought to the platform that would have made shooters better by default. It's significantly better than using a thumbstick, which is the default control scheme to most console games. IR aiming is the couch equivalent of aiming with a keyboard and mouse. Just like a keyboard and mouse, a Wii remote pointed at the screen has a full range of motion involving both your arm and your wrist that allows you to make both subtle and snappy movements, while a thumbstick is a small range of motion only involving the use of your thumb. The point is, the Wii could have been a first-person shooter machine if Nintendo just dedicated some more resources to it. Sure, we had some games like Red Steel 2, The Conduit, and Metroid Prime 3, but for the most part, IR aiming was never really brought out in its full potential. Like, why did Nintendo create their very own generic first-person shooter like a military shooter or an arena shooter like Team Fortress 2? Like, really, Splatoon should have come out a generation earlier, but Nintendo just kind of thought of IR aiming as the secondary feature for other games like aiming your bow in Zelda, and it was a huge missed opportunity. Like, Nintendo could have courted that male teenage to young adult demographic. Hell, they even deliberately abandoned IR aiming for Other M, and I've made an entire video on how garbage that game is. The Wii mostly focused on jamming forced motion controls onto everything. Like, in order to do things, you had to swing the Wii remote around. I'll never forget Mad World dedicating a launcher move to shaking the Wii remote. Unlike IR aiming, which is mechanically speaking a lot better than aiming with a thumbstick, most motion controls were just mapping inputs that used to be tied down to a button to waggling and flailing the Wii remote around. The motion sensing technology in the Wii was very hit or miss. Some games it worked good, like in Mario Kart Wii, but other games like Sonic and the Secret Rings, it was so bad I never touched a Sonic game ever again. The fact that Nintendo created the Wii Motion Plus adapter for Skyward Sword just goes to show how dated the technology was. Nintendo themselves didn't even have faith in it, and it even stopped working on their E3 press conferences. But let's just say Nintendo decided to really give a decent push for online shooters like Team Fortress 2 or COD and bring that to their console. You know, focus on IR aiming and making the most of it. It couldn't have possibly worked because the Wii had one of the worst online infrastructures in existence. The Wii was barely even in the 7th generation of consoles. The Wii was more like it was in the 6.5 generation of consoles. The online infrastructure for Nintendo was notoriously bad. It would be bad for a few generations to follow. Granted, the Wii Shop was pretty ahead of the curve, and to this day is still one of the best options for playing retro games. And if you actually wanted to play a video game on the internet with your friends, this was going to be one major inconvenience. First, Nintendo didn't have any online account system. You had to enter a 10-digit friend code per game to play with all of your friends. And since there was no account system, if you actually wanted to talk with your friends while you play with them, you had to use Skype, because this is 2007 and Discord and Zoom don't even work yet or even exist. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were well into the generation of online play, with the 360 having a pretty good party chat system way ahead of its time, and the games actually worked reliably, all things considered. The online play for Nintendo was hit or miss. I think Mario Kart Wii was the only game I played that functioned and worked properly. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was a laggy mess half the time, and I would know I played the hell out of that game. The bad online infrastructure wasn't just bad for online play. Games couldn't be patched on the Wii, and this was both a good thing or a bad thing. It was a good thing in that developers had to make sure that their games were 100% completed when they released one, but it was bad in the sense that, man, they couldn't fix anything if they did screw up. There was this notorious progress block in Metroid Other M that if the player goes back to save after beating a certain boss in the game for the third time, you'll be locked out of your progress. And that is borderline diabolical. Like, going back to save after fighting a difficult boss is just a reflex for most gamers. And I shit you not, the only way to solve this problem at the time was to physically mail your SD card with your saved file or your console itself to Nintendo and wait for them to patch the file and ship it back to you. Wow. So where does this leave us? All the problems that the Wii already had became magnified and multiplied when the Wii U came out, and Nintendo could no longer milk that stable audience of casual gamers. The casuals that Nintendo spent all their time courting during the 7th generation abandoned the Wii U for their cell phone. And just like how the Sega Genesis slowly killed itself with pointless add-ons like the 32X or the CD drive, the casual demographic completely mistook the Wii U as just another pointless peripheral for their Nintendo Wii. And the hardcore demographic was just so disgusted with motion controls that Nintendo themselves even started to distance themselves from it during the release of the Wii U. But the damage was already done. Nintendo had a bad reputation of having bad online play, and they didn't spend the time necessary during the Wii to build on that audience of hardcore gamers. And that left Nintendo with only their most hardcore Nintendo fanboys to carry the burden of Wii U, and it ended up making the console a complete failure. And all this was because all these problems were already there during the Wii generation. The Wii got away with all of these problems because they had a temporary monopoly on all those casuals.